Big George takes to the sky in a flying trike. Simon Reeve is with him. It's one way to see the mountains in Greece with Simon Reeve at 7:30. And now, discussing some of the most talked about events from the past week at the Proms, Goody Durham and guests in Proms Extra.
Tonight is a real classical music pick and mix. We have Brazilian street music, a Norwegian folk melody, and this. It's just another swinging night for Proms Extra. Hello and welcome to Proms Extra. Think of us as the neat little shortcut to the main street that is the Proms. And inside the Royal Albert Hall, there are no dead ends. Can you believe there's only a fortnight left of the Proms? No, me neither. In our penultimate show, Proms Extra is joined in our studio here at the Royal College of Music by some very special guests. By the end of August, our first guest will have conducted 3 proms in as few as 3 weeks. So far he's done Jamie Cullum and the Quincy Jones prom, with one more still to come. Last year, he and the Heritage Orchestra had 6,000 people raving all night to the Radio 1 Ibiza prom. Right here, right now, it's Jules Buckley. When Proms Extra was told that our next guest was bringing a touch of the Latin American spirit to the Proms, we were delighted and immediately put in our orders at the bar. We got it quite badly wrong, but she did indeed bring the right kind of spirit and vibes to the hall last Wednesday. No lime juice was involved. Please welcome a pianist who can make a masterpiece out of even the simplest tune, Gabriela Montero. We can blame a meeting with the jazz trumpeter Wynton Marsalis for getting our final guest into jazz as a schoolboy. With his saxophone, he's gone on to record successful jazz albums, win awards, and performed in prestigious venues both here and abroad. And if that wasn't enough kudos, his talents also stretched to organising an annual event underneath a flyover in Birmingham. Yes, a flyover. Please welcome Soweto Kinch. And to play us out at the end of the show are James Risdon and Matthew Wadsworth, 2 members of the British Para Orchestra who recently had the crowds clamouring for more when they performed at the Glastonbury Festival. So do stay tuned for that. Well, welcome to all of you. Jules, 2 down, 1 to go. What's next?
Next up is Kamasi, Washington in a few days' time, and we're well underway with preparations at the moment, but still lots to do.
Every minute counts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Gabriela, last week, the prom, Grieg, Brazilian music, you were a busy girl. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, so much. I loved bringing the Grieg to this kind of incredible arena that is the Royal Albert Hall, and then going into a different world with the jazz.
And your prom's debut, I can't believe it.
Absolutely. It was incredible to walk out into this massive space that was just electrifying.
And Soweto, what about this flyover? What's been going on?
Oh, I've been running myself ragged, enjoying, organising my own festivals, Ernest Wranglin and Eska Mutangwazi, who's also been performing here, I gather. But I've just really enjoyed checking out the proms and seeing in both of these people whose skills traverse different musical camps and do it so adroitly. So I've had a lot of fun watching the proms, to be honest. After I finished my own festival.
We love seeing that adroitness ourselves. Thank you. Lovely to have you all here. Thank you very much indeed. Well, for a change, we're going to start the show gently. Last Wednesday on BBC4, so the Sao Paulo Symphony Orchestra under Marion Alsop returned to the Royal Albert Hall. The evening was something of a world tour that took in South America, Russia, and then Fire and Ice from Norway, courtesy of Grieg's Piano Concerto, performed by our guest, Gabriela Montero. And Gabriela, do tell us about your relationship with this work, because you've been playing this since you were very small.
Yes, I think the first time I performed it, I was 11, and I learned it a little bit before. It's been a piece that's been with me all my life, and I find it to be a very grand and noble concerto, very undervalued in a way. It has moments of incredible inspiration, but also incredible explosions as well, which you might not truly expect too much from a Norwegian, but they have a different way of expressing themselves. But it's all in the music. It's all contained and ready to be tapped into. And there's a beautiful little anecdote about a great Venezuelan pianist who was admired by Liszt and by many of her time, Teresa Carreño. When she played Grieg's Piano Concerto, he was in the audience and came to her afterwards and said, "Madam, I didn't know that my concerto was so beautiful." So that's a nice little link there.
So if he was listening last night, you were channeling the spirit of that Venezuelan
I
pianist.
hope so. That's what I tried to do.
Well, let's have a listen and see a little excerpt of your performance now. Grieg's Piano Concerto shown last Wednesday on BBC4 with the Sao Paulo Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Marion Alsop, with our guest Gabriela Montero at the piano. It is extraordinary, Gabriela, that Grieg only wrote the one piano concerto. I mean, it was so good. Why didn't he keep going?
I don't really know the answer for that, but I think it's better to have one great concerto than to have several that are not, and he really nailed it with this one. I think it's a piece that has a little bit of everything, and it's also a piece that can be performed in many, many different ways. And of course, being Latin, I guess I bring my own kind of Latin rhythmic and also emotional, harmonic, let's say, understanding of it. But I just find that it's a very, very complete work. And it's also a very exciting work. It's not at all, conservative, classical. It's a romantic, open to interpretation piece that everybody loves. So.
Well, the crowd loved it in the hall, no question about that. What did you think, Soweto? Was this a new work for you?
Not at all, no. I think everyone recognises the first 4 bars at least. But I really enjoyed the dynamic range. It was just so engaging. There's particularly that moment where there's a big swell with trumpets and then it broke down to pizzicato on the violins, and just sections where it just really had me on the edge of my seat in a way that any good form of music does sometimes, But it was good. The unexpected elements that were in there I really enjoyed hearing.
Jules, what did you pick up out of it?
To be honest, for me, it was quite a nostalgic experience. It reminds me back when I was at school, the first time that I fell in love. Actually, there was the Grieg and there was the Rack 3, and I was in love with a young pianist, and she was able to rock both of these ones out. So I always wanted to come and see this live, and it took me back, and it was amazing. And there was maybe a little tear.
I need to know more. Who was she?
I can't reveal.
Is she still playing?
She's still playing, yeah.
In fact, we can reveal at the end of tonight's show. Here she is.
Just go through here.
I know you're far too modest, Gabriella, but we shouldn't, skirt around the fact that you were playing it wonderfully. And I think there was something of your spirit of improvisation which you could feel in the interpretation of the Grieg there. And I was just wondering if, Soweto, you as a jazz musician picked up on that?
Hugely, yeah. Even before a note was played, I think I remarked at how there was such a lack of tension in your body as well, and it was almost like you were just having fun, and you really internalised the music. You could feel the notes coming out before the execution of it, in a sense. And that's something that you've either spent a long time with your instrument, which is clear, or you've been into other forms of music besides classical as well. And you kind of imbibed, but as you said, bits of rhythm that were beyond the music that was on the page, so that was quite perceptible to me as a as a jazz guy.
Do please go to the BBC iPlayer and you can find the full Proms concert that includes Gabriella's performance, and you won't be disappointed. Now, Gabriella, do watch this next film closely, because we're going to stay with Grieg's Piano Concerto. This week, our own baby grand, David Owen Norris, lets us know who's calling the tune in his latest Chord of the Week.
The moment the piano's patience wears out in Grieg's Concerto, the orchestra begins the finale by playing a trick on the piano. They play this chord. And the correct resolution would be for this E flat to fall to this D. But that's the wrong key. A semitone too high. The piano's got a split second to save the show. Luckily, pianos know a thing or two about harmony. This might not be an E flat. It could be a D sharp. No difference on the piano keyboard. If it's a D sharp, it must rise, keeping us in the correct key of A minor. So in effect, the piano must say to the orchestra, I see your E flat and I raise you a D sharp. Now, if that's a D sharp, the chord's called a German sixth, because the Germans were the first to think of it. So the piano can use the international language of music to change the ambiguous German sixth into a French sixth, which isn't ambiguous at all. Just one note different. The C falls to a B, but that means that this note must be a D sharp, QED. And with that angry flourish, the piano changes the whole character of the concerto. It's always been the orchestra that's thought of the tunes so far. They began with... and it was the strings that thought of the slow movement melody. But now, by changing the German sixth into a French sixth, the piano takes control. And for the first time in the concerto, it's the piano calls the tune.
David Owen Norris and his Chord of the Week will be back for our final show next Saturday. Still to come on Proms Extra, a performance by James Risdon and Matthew Wadsworth at the end of the show, and we'll be taking a look at the Quincy Jones prom, which Jules conducted. Now, though, after their performance in the hall last Wednesday, you would think the Sao Paulo Symphony Orchestra would have packed up their music cases and headed back to their hotel for a nice cup of cocoa and an early night. All wrong. The night was young, and one disco nap later, the orchestra were back on stage, joined by members of the Sao Paulo Jazz Symphony Orchestra, and together with Marin, they hit the hall with the rhythmic sounds of Brazil. Whole host of wonderful musicians of Brazil and Gabriella there, performing with Maestro Marin also for a late-night Latin turn as part of the Proms. And it had to be the girl from Ipanema at some point, didn't it, in that concert? I mean, for me, Gabriella, I felt it did demonstrate the depth and breadth of Brazilian popular music.
Absolutely. Brazilian music is such a rich source of just harmonic, interesting, you know, just the way that this music just seems to have this air and this freshness, it's something that I've loved all my life. And just to join them with an improvisation to then lead into Girl from Ipanema was so much fun, because why be only the classical pianist, of course, but then be everything that you can be, you know, there are no limits, there are no boundaries.
I've always been fascinated by Brazilian music and all its different influences and all the different sort of geographical and cultural sort of routes that lead you up to the music we heard at that late night prom. I mean, did that work for you as a demonstration of that? So did you enjoy that? Is it
I've really enjoyed it, and you're basically trying to condense the musical history of a continent virtually, you know, considering how many different regions you've got. Frevo and Recife, you've got all that happens in Salvador and Bahia. and all these different movements into a short passage of music, but it worked really well. And I think probably gave people a flavour to want to go and hear more, the appetite to hear more.
Yeah, great to see classical musicians from the Sao Paulo Symphony Orchestra joined by colleagues of theirs from the Jazz Symphony Orchestra. I mean, as a conductor, is that a bit of a nightmare, having different musicians from different genres all together under your baton?
No, it's totally cool. I think as a conductor, when you're working with orchestras where you have musicians from different worlds, it's just a case of changing your mindset depending on what you want to work on. If it's the rhythmic stuff, if it's the improvisatory stuff, like knowing when to engage and when to step back and let the guys just do their thing. I mean, actually, you can't underestimate the power of, the Brazilian popular music history. For example, like Girl from Ipanema, I'm pretty sure it's like the second or third most recorded piece ever.
Second, fact, after yesterday.
Behind yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? So, that's some serious props.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole bossa nova revolution and how it was related to the politics of the time.
Yeah.
And all these incredible artists and how they, like Hermeto Pascoal, Edu Lobo, all these guys, and the link to the American jazz guys like Miles Davis, it's super cross-pollinated and it's maybe not enough people know about it,
Absolutely, it's just like this hidden musical world, and I think it's easy from where we are to just imagine hybridity just evolved, just happened, and everyone got along together. But this was often also with quite tense social circumstances, and people forget like Gilberto Gil was in exile here in Brixton, I believe, in the period of the military junta. A great composer like Pichinguinha came up just after slavery, effectively. It's the last country in the world to abolish slavery, and yet these relationships, these African retentions are hugely important in the evolution of Brazilian music.
Now, Gabriella, I just want to pick up on how you approached improvisation. Earlier in the evening, as your encore after the Grieg piano concerto, you asked the audience for some help for the improvisation, and they were a little bit shy.
Incredibly, they were. I didn't expect that, yeah.
But then, tell us what you did.
I decided then, someone backstage had said, why don't you improvise on Hope and Glory? So then I said, okay, let's do it on this. And then off I went into, I think, something that was very Bachian, to then, I heard it was then a ragtime. So I love to show the contrast and also the similarities between the styles and the composers and that bridge that connects us through time and styles.
I couldn't resist it. We're going to see a little piece of Land and Hope and Glory as you have never heard it before. It was awesome. I mean, the crowd went bananas after that. Just, can you explain what is going through your head?
I remove myself, actually. I allow this creative process to happen without my intellectual, let's say, involvement. Somehow music filters through me. In fact, it's very interesting because neurologically, there's an explanation for this, and this has to do with a big neuroscience study that's been done on my brain and how it behaves when I improvise versus when I play a written score. And really what happens neurologically is that my brain shuts down the function that I use to, that controls when I play a written piece. That shuts down and then co-opts a different part of the brain, which is the part that improvises, which is not used for music. So what I explain as just closing down is effectively my brain behaving very differently. And it feels like I'm skydiving in music, and I land and I love the journey.
And is that how it feels for you, Soweto?
A lot of the time, and I wonder, is it also the same regions of the brain that light up where language is concerned as well? They say that in improvising. I think that I've assimilated languages and musical languages, and it's quite interesting hearing you improvising that the building blocks were quite distinct from bebop musicians that he would use like licks and phrases and in particular musically linguistic devices to get around a series of chord changes.
Yeah, sometimes they're almost like stuff that's gone to the back of the brain that you just can't help but bring in, and then after it's like, oh man, I
couldn't help use that lick, man. And it's the bane of so many jazz musicians, like trying to escape licks and to get something more elemental and pure in the improvising that you're doing. But for me, it's much like language, it's much like discussion. I listen, I've learned English, and I'm able to improvise sentences based on that knowledge of language. And then bewilder people. Like, you're just making up stuff as you go along.
But it's a language, like you say, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, I wish I could speak that language. I really do. Well, head to the Proms online and let the rhythm of the night come into your own living room. No one need know. Now, Proms Extra makes no apologies for being nosy. We like a little secret or two, and with so many orchestras coming in and out of the hall, we asked ourselves this. When a classical musician takes their instrument out of its case, what Proms Extra really wants to know is what's in the box.
is my little box of tricks. I have a photograph of my children.
This is my box of tricks, and this is what I have in it. Here's the reeds. Every reed feels different, even if it's made to the same specifications.
I'm going to tell you what's in my box. Some valve oil to make sure that the valves, these things here, don't stick.
Cigarette papers that we all use.
Not because of smoke, but this is what I use to clean my instrument. So just slot it in like that because it's nice and thin. Press the pad down and that will absorb most of the water. I have two bows. I have my main bow and then a spare bow that I use when this one's being rehead or in certain atmospheres.
Reed knife, but it's all here just in case.
I've also got this little device which is useful to be able to shave the reed down a little bit.
Oh wow, Mummy, it's quite a bit of fun.
I haven't gone into the darkened recesses of my box for many a year. Could be anything in there.
I have oil. Keys get very clicky after heavy use.
There's nothing in our box apart from us getting changed.
I've got the cork grease.
An orchestra warming up's the worst sound on earth. It's much better down here.
Some earplugs, I think, in there somewhere. When the drums get too loud.
For reed adjustment, the pliers.
An elastic band.
Screwdrivers.
A few brochures. This is when, so I went on tour to Florida.
This is my case, and that pig book is great. It keeps me very amused. And this is the stress pig. See, it's stress pig when you need it. Stress pig!
That is a polishing cloth. I never use it. I can't even remember what it's for. It's too small for it.
So that's what's in my box.
And that's pretty much everything that's in my box.
That's everything that's in my box.
And that's what's in my box.
Sweater, what is in your box?
Quite boring, honestly. Usually just spare reeds. I can empathise with the oboe guy. You never know when you need a new assortment of reeds. But once a great saxophone player, Jean Toussaint, wrote some scores, just some little scales to practice that with. I ended up folding it and putting it in my case, and it wasn't out of superstition, except for the fact I'm just a bit untidy. That piece of paper followed me in the case around for at least a year, I think. So there you go.
Do you carry anything with you, Jules, when you're, apart from your baton, when you're on tour?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a box, which is quite sad, but I do have a bag. I do have my suit bag, and in that I do have a little Buddha.
Oh.
And for some reason, this Buddha just turned up in there one day, and since then he stays in there all the time.
Is that for sort of a good luck charm, do you think?
Yeah, I've definitely got some superstitions, and I generally try to always wear the same pair of trainers as well on concerts, and I try to make it look like they're not trainers.
Are these your lucky ones you're wearing?
No, these are
right
my
now?
old ones, actually, yeah.
How about you, Gabrielle? Any little traditions or good luck charms?
My life is so volatile and crazy that there's nothing that I can call routine. I would have to say I always carry little letters that my daughters or my husband have written to me, very sentimental. But there's no schedule, there's no routine, there's nothing consistent.
It works. Don't change it.
I frequent traveler cards, that's the main thing.
Or that little card that tells airlines you are allowed to take your instrument on the airplane.
Not in my case.
Not
but,
pianist. But still, you could probably get one. Yeah.
Now, Quincy Jones may not be a familiar name to some of you, but he is the brains behind Michael Jackson's iconic albums such as Thriller and Bad. He wrote the film score to The Italian Job and, well, a million other things too. And if you still don't get who Quincy is, then have a listen to what our past Proms extra guest Nitin Sawhney and some other prommers had to say.
Quincy Jones is simply one of my favourite producers. I mean, he's worked with some of my heroes, from Michael Jackson to George Benson. Incredible artist.
So I've been listening to Quincy's music since I was like about 18 years old. Quincy is such a thunderbolt of music. I'm just really excited to see it live.
He is probably one of the greatest living musical impresarios. I don't know what you'd call him.
He's got his own unique sound, and I think it comes from like his attention to detail.
What a great way to celebrate such a massive name in kind of music at the Albert Hall.
I've grown up with Quincy Jones. I have danced, sweated, cried.
For me, there's no one else. Quincy's the man.
It's only one day. Quincy, one day. It should have been a week. It's going to be so mega, isn't it? Because the whole place will just erupt, won't it?
If he does make an appearance, I'm sure the roof will just...
Are there going to be paramedics there? Because if he does, I'm going to pass out.
And that gives you just a little idea of the excitement surrounding the Quincy Jones prom night last Monday. Well, Jules, you were there, you were conducting it. How did it all come about?
Well, it came about 8 months ago. I was discussing with the Proms team, trying to come up with a cool idea to put together for this season, and I kind of had a hit list, and Quincy was smack bang at the top of it. So together with John Cumming, I just put together a kind of a brief of the idea I had, and we got in touch with Quincy's guys, and the response was very positive. And from that point, it was just a case of trying to figure out what we were going to do. And with such a giant of the, 20th, 21st century, like the man, really, no equal, what are you going to do? But over the process of these 8 months, I basically kept liaising with Q and with his team back and forth about the set and what we would do, and then eventually we kind of whittled it down to a 90-minute or maybe more than that set.
So you whittled down the music. He was happy with it right from the start. The whole idea of having this evening and a prom, he was on board.
Sure,
Was he?
yeah. I think that Q had always wanted to have a moment to celebrate his music at the Albert Hall, and this to him felt like the perfect opportunity, and I think for the Proms too.
Well, let's take a look.
So much to say to you. I want you to know. Wish you could tell me. Oh, let them see.
How could I hold this heart that still loves you? That still loves you.
Gabriella, I want to hear you play a Hammond organ like that. I really, really do.
I would love to. I would love to. Are you kidding me? I mean, the possibilities. And this guy just seems to be enjoying every single physical contact with, it's just incredible.
I mean, Soweto, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Michael Jackson, but Quincy just keeps on finding amazing new talent, doesn't he? I mean, how does he do it?
And it's happened era upon era. I remember it must have been the early 90s when he had an album, Back on the Block, that introduced Tevin Campbell to the world at the same time as having Ella Fitzgerald on the same album. I think there are many people who have such an eye for the future as well as contextualizing what they do in the past. And who else traverses Lionel Hampton right up until, the 80s and 90s. So.
I mean, actually, he's still rocking it right now.
Yeah.
Some of the pieces that we performed on the concert with, for example, Cuban pianist Alfredo Rodriguez were produced by Q this very year, and we presented a concert version of that. So it's crazy to think, but it's 2 centuries he's been rocking it in. And
I was also listening to the concert thinking, what's the thread that connects all these disparate things, from the theme to Roots to Ironside?
Yeah.
And it's this thing of personality that's really there, these sort of cheeky motifs that he's great at, and earworms. He's the genius of earworms. He's getting your head with a little riff that you can't help singing.
True.
And also that you can establish your own personality over the top of, which is any great jazz composition, all the best ones just allow you to be even more of yourself when you're solo.
Yeah, because I found through the process of putting this program together that, of course, many people know Q as, Michael Jackson's producer. So in a way, from my childhood, I thought, okay, well, he's just this amazing pop music producer. And then at a certain point, when I used to be a jazz trumpet player, I started to get into arranging. And then you find the Lionel Hampton, the Count Basie, the Frank Sinatra Live at the Sands. So you freak out a second time. And then you find his film scores, The Italian Job, The Pawnbroker, The Colour Purple. So you freak out a third time. Then you find out that he even co-produced The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the whole TV series, and then he did We Are the World or God knows what, and Thriller, and then at a certain point you're just stood there kind of in a nervous frenzy trying to figure out what am I going to do for 100 minutes of national TV.
And then you realise that he is the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, a question from our team, actually. We were all watching you conduct. What's with the headphones? What are you listening to?
Well, sometimes in the Albert Hall, it's quite a challenge. This space, when you're doing much louder, more amplified gigs, you need to make sure that the sound is right. So, for example, with the Sao Paulo project with Marin, everything was effectively acoustic. And so you can blend it that way. But when you've got Hammond organs, you've got synthesizers, you've got vocoders, you've got a slamming big band from the Metropole Orchestra, you need to be able to balance it. So sometimes it's better to reduce the monitoring level on stage by wearing headphones to get a better sound.
And some of the hand gestures you use as well, is that just your style, or is this sort of magic code that we're now going to, have unpicked?
Well, actually, it goes back to that good question you brought up about with the Sao Paulo Symphony Orchestra and the Sao Paulo Jazz Orchestra, and it's basically a case of bringing skill sets from different worlds and then putting them together and deciding when to be very direct and very clear and when to do nothing, just mosh, and, or when to be super expressive and just, with the strings and let's move. And I guess it's kind of like you have a tool belt of a skill set as a conductor, and depending on the repertoire you're doing, you decide which of these tools you will use. So, for example, Marin with Gabriella, they are like an absolute, there's an absolute unity there. So Marin is translating with Gabriella for the orchestra, because that's what it's all about.
And Quincy Jones, he was there. We've talked a bit about his music, talked a bit about the man, but I mean, some of the influence he's had on society and on the civil rights movement, he was very political as well, wasn't he?
I think music always comes from a culture and a community, and often it's easy just to sort of extrapolate stars and think that they've just dropped fully formed from the universe somewhere. Actually, I think it's great that he's aware of the roughness of his upbringing in Chicago, but also what an emblem he can be to other people from similar backgrounds. Being commissioned to write the score for something like Roots is a huge commission if you're African American, if you're from the diaspora anywhere around the world, and I'm sure he's aware of the weight of that history, but in a way that when you hear the music, it's not oppressive or weighed down at all. It's something that's epic and inspiring. So I think he's demonstrated how to be an activist, civil rights activist in the best possible way, and that is, celebrating those aspects, those triumphant things in his experience, and just excelling in what he does.
Well, do go to the BBC iPlayer to see the Quincy Jones prom. Practice your swing moves, do a moonwalk to Billie Jean. Enjoy yourself.
I thought that you were going to do the moonwalk, actually.
Later.
Stay in tune for that.
Now, as it's the bank holiday weekend, I'm feeling generous, and rather than giving you a dodgy barbecue or a DIY workbench, I have something far better. A clip from last night's Mozart Requiem. Ivan Fischer conducting the Budapest Festival Orchestra, shown last night on BBC4. And Mozart's Requiem can be easily found online alongside many of the Proms broadcasts, including Proms Extra. Remember, all the Proms are broadcast live on BBC Radio 3 every night. That is it for this evening. Proms Extra and I will be back next week for our final show. We have great guests, great performances, and a look back at a great season. It's going to be brilliant. I would like to thank my guests, Jules Buckley. Good luck with the Master Washington Prom next week. Gabriella Montero, thank you so much. Soretta Kinch, lovely to see you here. Thank you all for great chat. I'll leave you now with a performance by two star soloists who are also members of the British Para Orchestra, the world's first ensemble of professional disabled musicians, who recently had the Glastonbury Festival audience going crazy when they performed Philip Glass's Heroes Symphony. Tonight, to play out the show, we have Matthew Wadsworth on the lute and James Risdon on recorder, playing Costello's Sonata Seconda. Goodbye. you.